Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Beauty and Gratitude. I have a great show for you today. And before we dive into that, I want to talk about a few things. I've been really inspired lately, and this show really is about inspiration, it's about beauty, and it's about gratitude, but I think they all marry in many ways. So a friend sent me this book. It's called Walk Toward the Rising Sun. I don't know if you could see that. Let's pull it back. And it's by Gregg and it's a story about a child soldier and his total transformation from being a child soldier to being an ambassador of peace. And I'm going somewhere with this, so just hang in there. And there's also this book, and some of you may know of it, it's called Humans of New York. And he just came out with this beautiful book, Brandon Stanton, about just people not only all over New York City, but all over the world and their stories. Their stories of perseverance, their stories of just triumph over many things in life, which I find to be very beautiful. So not only do I talk about beauty, because I've been a makeup artist for over 30 years, but I think beauty manifests in many ways. And part of this show is about the creative process and how that affects us as well as artists. I have today with us China Colston, who is an actress, writer and a director, Gregg Brockington, a makeup artist extraordinaire, and Deborah Freeze, who's an amazing author, also a poet from what I read, we'll talk about that, and musician and illustrator. So we're gonna talk about many things today, so we'll be right back. Thank you.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame, living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Solivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Welcome back, everyone. Hi, China.
Hi, D'Angelo. How are you?
I'm great. So I have to disclose to everybody, I've known China for a very long time. I would say over 34 years. We actually went to the same creative arts high school.
Yes,
So,
we did.
Yeah. So China, I knew that you were a dance major for sure. Also voice, correct?
Theater major and dance minor.
Okay, theater major and dance minor. So I remember taking classes, I forget her name, but in the dance studio and also doing like runway workshops and everything. So I know you from high school, but I don't know what your life was like outside of high school. So explain your life in Chicago in your teen years.
Thank you for having me on, first of all. Chicago, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I grew up in England. Inglewood as a child. Same thing. No, I grew up in Inglewood as a child. My mother and my father, shout out to them, they always exposed me to theater and film. As a child, my mother took my cousins and I to the museums because at the time they were free. So she could expose us to culture. And she would take us to the lakefront all the time, and we would go window shopping because my father and my mother were not in a position to shop, but we could always see what we could attain in the future.
And dream.
She really exposed us to just to look outside of the immediate community. Yes. And I played double dutch like with little girls and raced boys, that's what I did.
Yes. Chicago, I moved there when I was around 12. So it was from the South, so from Mississippi into the inner city of Chicago. And I was like, ooh, and culture shock. But I was going to grammar school on the west side at Gladstone, And I remember looking for high schools, like where I really wanted to go to high school. And Chicago has these different programs where city kids can apply to different high schools around the city. And I chose Curie. And it literally was an hour and a half commute for me every morning to get there. Yeah, for 4 years. Yeah. And I worked after school and everything. So I was always busy. And I think hence what I'm doing now, 1,000 things. But so what led you, besides studying arts in high school, what led you to pursue it as a career?
It's tricky. Well, I always had it in me to be creative, right? So I remember I was dealing with a breakup.
Okay.
And I wanted to use that energy in a constructive manner. So I chose to enroll in an ETA Theater's Stylist acting class, method class, taught by Coral Johnson on the south side of Chicago. And that is, I end up taking, we have to do a student showcase, adult student showcase in June the following year. And the response from the audience was very favorable. And I decided I'm going to pursue it as a career because I was moved by the craft of it and to get the response from the audience, which is, it was a joyful experience.
Yes, yes. When did you start writing? Did you start writing shortly after that, or did you do acting for a few years?
I did acting for a few years, and then I chose to begin writing my own screenplay because I would just learn from the paradigm. So if I would interpret a screenplay, a script as an actress, I started to just kind of follow the paradigm of the screenplay and notice that the character had to have an agenda. There had to be a conflict in place of their agenda, and then they had to overcome the agenda to achieve their goal. And so I just kind of started, and I read Steve Field's Screenwriter's Workbook as a tangible reference as to the craft of screenwriting. So that was like 5-6 years later.
Wow, that's beautiful. So that's part of your creative process. It led you not only to act, but to be a screenwriter and eventually make independent films, which,
yes.
Did that happen before you moved to New York or slightly after?
It happened in my first film, Journey of the Heart, was produced in 2004, and we had an official release in 2005 on the north side of Chicago.
Okay. What was that film called?
Journey of the Heart.
Love it. Love it. And then when you moved to New York, I remember running into you in New York City, and you were telling me that you were going to move. And, and we would run into each other in strange ways, like every other month. Sometimes it'll be a 4-month stretch. We're going to get together and have drinks. We're going to get together and have dinner. It never happened. However, you started letting me know about projects you were working on. And one was before, I think it was Sweet Thing was one of them.
Yes.
And there was another one before that. But we started talking. I was like, you know what? I want to help her produce one of her films because I could see you pouring your heart, your passion, and everything into it. So talk about some of your films, especially like Sweet Thing, and then other films that happened before and after, actually.
Okay, so Dark Seed was, no pun intended, but that seed was planted in my soul in 2003 when I went to the Museum of Science and Industry. And I had writer's block, and I chose to write a poem. A playwright in Chicago, wonderful playwright, Eric B. Scott. He said, well, since you're having writer's block, why don't you write a poem, and maybe the poem will inspire dialogue and or scenes. And I took his advice, and then I still had writer's block, and it still didn't work. But and then I moved to New York, and I said, you know what, China, stop procrastinating, revisit Dark Seed and write it. And I did. And with the village, we know it takes a village to produce a film. It takes an island to write the screenplay. It takes a village to produce the film, right? And so Dark Seed is basically a love story set in Brooklyn about this professional couple at odds over family life. And I went to film festivals to get awards for Best Feature Film, and I got Best Actress. And it was a challenge because it took 4 years to produce. Right? It took
That's what a lot of
4
people
years.
don't realize is that films from the conception of the film, the idea to writing it down, to deciding who you want to produce it with, to your cast, your crew, your location, that this can be a 1 to 4 year process. It's not overnight. And so you have to be in it to win it for the long haul, right? I mean, with Sweet Thing, it was an honor to work on it because I know that it focuses on diabetes within urban communities, especially. So talk about Sweet Thing. I think it's an amazing film.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming aboard as associate producer.
Yes.
And let me just shout D'Angelo out real quick. So when D'Angelo showed up on the scene, location in Harlem, he's very low key. He has the camera, he's taking like behind the scenes shots. He's like trying everything's cool. And he just stays back in the cut, and I appreciate that. But also with Sweet Thing, so I was living in the Bronx at the time, and I remember I would head to work, like at 7 o'clock in the morning, and people were going to school and work. And I remember literally seeing people in line to buy drugs, like out of New Jack City. And I was like, this is not real, is it? And I remember D'Angelo, I said to them, good morning. And they looked at me like, is she actually speaking to me? Yes, because you're a human being with a beating heart.
Yes, beautiful.
That's why I'm acknowledging you.
Right.
You have an addiction. You're not a monster.
Right.
And from that experience, I said, I want to write a film about a female drug dealer, but she's selling a different kind of drug in Harlem, in the Bronx, and Brooklyn. And I want to tell a story of a woman who is guarded and isolated, who really at the core just wants the love of her community and respect from her community. Yeah. Right. So that's why I wanted to write Sweet Thing.
Okay. Can we talk about what she was selling or no?
No, let's keep it a surprise.
Okay. Okay. That's beautiful. I know that you're working on a project now. So what does the future look like for you?
So right now I'm currently working on a screenplay titled To Cook or Not to Cook. Shout out to Shakespeare.
Yes.
It's my feature-length film, and it's about a young woman who's estranged from her chef father living in Harlem. And just dealing with how they go about navigating their reconnection by happenstance.
Yes. And food being at the center of it, which is the heart, right?
Yes.
It really is.
Food is the bridge.
Yes.
Food is the bridge to their relationship.
Wow. I know you mentioned it to me a few months ago, and I was like, yes, do it. Because I think this time in history, 2020, it's about healing. It's about healing, not only within our nation, but globally. And a lot of that healing starts, as Gregg, when he comes on, he's a Buddhist, and we'll talk about that, it starts at home, and then it expands outside of ourselves. So it's beautiful that you're using food and the connection between a daughter and her father and reconnecting them, the bridge, it's beautiful. So how can we reach you on social media?
You can reach me, you can follow me on the China the Actress. It's spelled just like the country, China the Actress. And then, I can see all my updates and such.
Okay. And what about, I know that people can go to your website as well to download some of your films or to see what else you're doing. So what's your website?
My website is my name, ChinaLColston.com, ChinaLColston.com, where I sell my films and Sweet Thing t-shirts.
Cool, perfect. China, hang on. I want you to come back at the end for the round robin. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much. And we'll be right back, everyone.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Soul Liberty Live.
Hey, how you doing, sir? My sister, how are you?
Hey.
This one, right? we might need some more wine for this.
So, let's get this party started, y'all.
Hey, my sister, mademoiselle.
That is the most amazing introduction I have ever heard.
Oh, being here. Oh, what an amazing day. Go make it even more amazing. myself and Madison, Brian Wesley Johnson. Thank you for joining us on Saturday morning. Full of passion, purpose, and high quality living. See you next time.
I'm done.
Watch Soul Livity Live with Brian Wesley Johnson every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on Soul Livity TV.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I would like to introduce the extraordinary makeup artist, Gregg Brockington. Thank you. Hi, Gregg.
Hi, D'angelo. How are you? Thank you for
How are
that.
you doing, my friend? How are you doing?
Really, really well. How are you?
You know what's interesting? I was trying to make the connection when we met. I honestly don't know, but what I do know is that every time I saw you, you gave me a smile and a genuine hello. And to live in New York amongst millions, 12 million people, for someone to constantly give you that, I was like, this guy what's going on? He's amazing. So I know you grew up in New York, correct?
I did. I was born in Manhattan on 98th Street.
Wow.
Tell
me.
In Brooklyn. Sorry.
Okay. Tell me about that experience growing up in New York. I mean, can you talk about the years? Was it the 70s?
Sure. It was the 70s.
Yes.
I was in my teens in the 70s, and it was, New York was really gritty, but it was fantastic.
Yes.
There was so much energy. There was so much raw energy. There was so much creativity because, the other side of it was so down. People were making themselves happy by creating these amazing, amazing things. So New York was fun when I was a teenager, sneaking out to go to parties or the museum, like China as well.
And you have so much at your disposal in New York City, within the arts, so much,
Yeah.
And did your parents guide you as far as museums and Broadway and things like that?
I mean, my parents weren't adverse to any of that stuff, but they didn't have access to it. They were busy working and keeping the roof over our head and making sure I got good grades and that kind of thing. But they never discouraged me from being artistic, and they never discouraged me from seeking stuff. So I don't think many people know the story, but when I was in junior high school, I lived in the Bronx. And I remember I was in like a choir class, and I was sitting there, and I had just moved to this neighborhood. I didn't know the kids, and I was kind of, nervous and stuff. And this kid reached over to me as the teacher turned around and said, after class, stab you.
Oh, God.
Well, okay. All right. So I raised my hand, asked if I can go to the bathroom. I exited the school.
Smart.
And I stepped foot in it again. But in that 6 months that I played hooky, and 6 months of getting home early and getting the mail so my mom couldn't see it so I wouldn't get in trouble, I went to the museums. I went to galleries. I snuck in Carnegie Hall. I read tons of books. I kind of educated myself. And that's because I lived in New York, and all of that stuff was at my disposal. And I was some unassuming 12-year-old. They didn't care if I was walking into the Met. So New York has a lot of advantages, and it did for me for sure.
In a sense, that kid was an angel. Because he pushed you outside of your comfort zone, even though you're trying to protect yourself.
For real.
Yes. I know, fast forward, New York now in 2020 compared to how it was when you grew up. And I moved to New York in the late 80s. So I got a tail end of some of what you're talking about. And then it started to shift the mid 90s into the 2000s. So 30 years, almost 40 years. I see a wave. I see a similarity with what's going on now. And I feel like there's going to be a major creative wave coming.
I think so too.
Yes.
I think so because what was going on in the 70s, if I remember correctly, because I was a kid, but there was a lot of strife, there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of disparity between the rich and the poor. We had the South Bronx was a desert. It was the scariest place that I'd ever been to as a kid in the mid to late 70s. And so there were these pockets of that kind of thing around the city, and it was really scary. But like I said before, it was really interesting and energetic. Now, New York has mellowed so much in a lot of ways.
Too much.
It's sort of almost as if all the colors of New York, and New York has so many rich, deep colors, are starting to get swirled together. Yeah. In a way that's great because it makes us all in contact with each other. We know each other's stories. We get to be respectful because we know each other now. But that way of like walking into a neighborhood and knowing where you are from the sound,
right,
is not happening as much.
Right, very true. It's interesting you use a lot of art analogies. So I know you're an artist. So what led you to becoming an artist? Before a makeup artist, actually, what led you to that?
I don't know. There was something in my growing up. I watched a lot of movies as a kid. Old movies were just like, they could be so hokey, but
beautiful.
The look of them was so beautiful. I mean, there were people I see now that I'm thinking, how was I still enthralled? But it was so big and gorgeous and whatever. And so I've always been drawn to sort of cinema and cinematic kinds of things. And so in school, I was also the kid that always doodled. So no matter what class it was, and we're taking notes, I'm doodling. Yes. And it was always an eye of some sort. It could be an eye in a building, an eye on a plane, but it was always an eye. And then there became more fashion eyes.
Interesting.
And so that kind of led me to where I am today. I did other things before I became a makeup artist. I worked for a company that designed hand-painted batik fabric. And so I did that for several years, which I loved. But you know, all these things sort of happened and led me to the next thing. I've always liked makeup. I always sort of played around with makeup. I always did the makeup for my friends as we were going out in the late 70s, early 80s, and everyone was really sort of done up. We had a ball. And, you know, one thing leads to another. And then I put together a book and leave the country and start a career.
Wow. And I know part of that adventure was Italy. You moved to Italy.
8 years.
8 years. And that's an education in itself. I think it's so important. And I stress sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, it's important to travel. That's an education in itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How was Italy for you?
Italy was amazing for me. You know, I lived in Milan where fashion is, and people either hate it or they love it. I'd always known I was going to go to Europe at some point. My dad was in World War II and was stationed in France. He spoke horrible pidgin French to me, and I thought it was the most exotic, beautiful thing I'd ever heard. My mom's first cousin, who was an artist, lived in Paris for several years and started his art career there. So I knew at some point I would have the adventure as well. I went to Paris initially. I flew out of New York. My first time ever leaving the country. I was going to leave for 3 months. I arrived in Paris, used my high school French, got absolutely nowhere, and got on a train and went to Milan. And the difference in attitude from Paris to Milan was so startling. First night in Paris, I was like wandering around trying to figure out how to call my mom.
Right.
And the first night in Milan, I was at someone's home, invited as a guest, having dinner.
They're like, come in, black man, come in.
So nice. It was so welcoming. And, you know, I made great friends there and I fell in love there and I traveled from there and I started this career from there. So Milan has an enormously special place for me in my heart.
Right. And then you moved back to New York. So that transition must have been hard. It would have been hard for me. I'm sure you cried like a baby. I would have.
I cried when I left New York and I got to Paris. I thought, what the hell have I done?
Oh, wow.
When I came back to New York, I was ready to come back to New York.
Yes.
Okay. You know, I've said before, and I'll say it again, no matter how long you live in a country, no matter how well you speak the language, no matter how well you understand the politics, you are still a foreigner.
Right.
And so I got tired after a while, not deeply tired, but, you know, I just thought, I don't want to be a foreigner anymore. I want to sort of be in a place where what I say matters.
Yes.
And also come back to a place that was really busy for the job that I do. And so it was, you know, there were several layers to my coming back. It wasn't it wasn't sad per se. I was happy to be here. It was kind of culture shock. I noticed it in the first year because I have some really dear friends, 2 best friends actually. And I remember hearing from both of them, why are you speaking so strange? And I thought, what do you mean? I'm from Brockington. Like, what do you mean? But what had happened is my being in Europe for 8 years and speaking English to non-English speaking people, my cadence slowed. I started to over enunciate things. And so I brought that back. But also with that thing that if anyone speaks a second language, they'll know, you think you have this phrase in your head that you use all the time in that language. And when you do it someplace else, it just doesn't work there. So I was saying these things the first year and they were like, what? And I was like, oh, right, sorry. So I had to do that, like come back to my own culture.
Right.
For a minute. And then it was
so a total re-education of yourself. And I know part of that is the creative process, right? So how do you prepare for a shoot? What do you have a big editorial coming up. What is your process days before? Because I know I have a process. What's yours?
Usually, I mean, by the time I get the brief, like let's say we're doing a 1920s story on that's based on something that says Sweden. So we're doing that sort of mix. I'll go through all the references I have. I'll go to references online. And if I'm really fortunate, there's something at some museum that references something about it, even in the abstract. And so I'll go and see all these things and I take a sketchbook, a lot of places that I go and just jot down things, or again, it could be an eye with an idea, it could be a lip with an idea. And then I start looking at the person I'm gonna work on.
Yes.
And things shift again.
Yes.
Because obviously I've got to make what I'm thinking work on the face that I'm gonna be working with the photographer I'm working with his or her type of lighting that is specific. So I've got to tool all my things to that and make my vision come through while also working as a team.
Yes. Gregg, this is like a masterclass, and I wish young artists would hear this because it's like a pie. We all have a piece of that pie. The makeup artist, the stylist,
we are not pie.
Yeah, we're not the pie. We are a part of the pie. And, you know, when I go on set, I make sure I say hello to everybody. I pay attention to the lights and how they're set up. If they're warm, if they're cool, if they're using a strobe light, et cetera, et cetera. And of course you learn this over time, you know, but it helps you in almost every setting. It makes you more alert and more aware of what's going on around you. So I think that's a true testament to yourself as an artist, first and foremost, and a creative. I wanna say that,
before you go on, D'angelo, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, please do.
Speaking to everyone when you're at work, I learned an enormous lesson from supermodel Giselle Bundchen.
Yes.
I was on set as an assistant at the time with Tom Pesciot, who I do. And I remember we were working with like Mario Testino, and Giselle came in and I was amazed because I'd seen her out and I'd seen her around, but I'd never been in the same studio. She came in and said hello to every single person that was there. Every single person she said hello to. And when she was finished, if she couldn't get to everyone, she said it to the room.
Yeah.
And I learned an enormous lesson with that. Everyone in that room helped you look good in some way.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone in that room had something to do with your day. So it's really important to acknowledge everyone when you walk into a room all the time. It's so important.
And we know how a lot of them come in. And we know the work that we do to make them look fabulous. And that takes a village. Yeah.
But even us as non in front of the camera, it's all of our responsibilities to be in the room.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Being present. That's so true. Gregg, how can we reach you? Where can we reach you? I want people to follow you on Instagram and share.
My Instagram is Gregg Brockington Beauty. I'm with Sally Harlow Agency in New York City.
Perfect.
And D'Angelo, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. And I'm not done yet, though. I have a few more questions. you got me pulled in right now, so I have a few questions. I know for beauty for you is makeup artistry, but also it's food, and we've talked a little bit about food. You cooked this fig dish a few weeks ago. I was enamored by it. What was it exactly?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so
See?
I'll make a long story short.
Okay.
I've been with my partner for 25 years.
Okay.
We've always lived in separate apartments. During this pandemic, we are sharing a space for the first time ever for the past 7 months. And it's been fantastic, by the way.
That's beautiful.
But what it also has taught me is that because I'm not working because our industry is shut down, and he is working so much more because all of his business is Zoom. So he's working, these long, arduous days. I really felt like it was let me rephrase that. What I wanted to do to support my partner.
I get that.
Was to make sure he always came downstairs to something that was scrumptious.
Right. Yes.
So at lunch there was something, at dinner there was something, and not because I felt an obligation, it's because I really wanted to.
From the heart.
So in this time, I've been having the time to experiment and try this and do this and do this. And so I finally got to that fig thing. It was fig season. I went to the green market somewhere and they were like, we got tons of figs. I think I bought every fig they had. I made fig jam. And then I was like, I've got leftovers. So I tried this thing and it was figs on pastry baked with some jam. Came out great. What I turned it into were these fig Newtons.
Oh, yes.
And it was ridiculous. Just amazing.
And I'll circle back to this. I love fig oil. I love figs. I love figs in meat. I love it in salads. I love it in every way possible. Figs is also an aphrodisiac. I don't know if you know that. Yeah. So if you ever want to put some oil in a bath, hey, the rest will be history. We'll be right back with Deborah Freeze. Thank you, guys.
My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Soul Liberty Live.
Hey, how you doing, sir? My sister, how are you?
Hey.
This line, right? we might need some more wine for this.
So let's get this party started, y'all.
Hey, my sister, mademoiselle.
That is the most amazing introduction I've ever heard.
Oh, being here. Oh, what an amazing day. Go make it even more amazing.
Myself and Madison, Brian Wesley Johnson. Thank you for joining us on Saturday morning. Full of passion, purpose, and high quality living. See you next time.
Bye.
Watch Soul Liberty Live with Brian Wesley Johnson every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on Soul Liberty TV.
Welcome back, everyone. I would like to introduce author, poet, musician, phenomenal woman, Deborah Freeze.
Thanks,
Good
D'angelo.
intro, right? Good intro, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. I think I'm going to record that and replay it. Thank you so much for having me here. But I want to say also that I just love listening to Gregg and China. Like, your passion and sense of adventure is really inspiring.
It is. And you're inspiring. We met via Zoom, Deborah and I, and I'm just really in awe of you as a writer, and also an illustrator. You do beautiful work. Can you talk about what led you to writing? I know it starts at a very young age, so take us there.
I'll start from the very beginning. When I was a kid, I don't know really what my childhood was like. I don't have specific memories, but I do remember singing and dancing through the house and wanting to be Julie Andrews. Not the Sound of Music Julie Andrews, the one with the umbrella who just sang a lot of fun songs. And yes. I just kind of dreamed my life as a child. I was always inside my imagination. I never had a shortage of books or art supplies or any of that kind of thing. And I actually, when I think I was about 10, I sent off some kind of a thing in a comic book where you draw something and they tell you if you have talent. Never told my parents, and they called. And it terrified me. And what I found over the years was I was not as ready to embrace my creativity as China and Gregg were. I was kind of terrified of it. And I'm not quite sure why. There was a lot of fear there, I guess, because I was a closet, well, no, I wasn't a closet perfectionist at that point in time. I was a perfectionist, and it was never quite the way I wanted it to be.
Yes.
That kind of led to writing. I think by the time when I was 10, I taught myself to play guitar, and I started writing music. And I survived being a teenager because of music. I wrote a lot of, they were really mournful love songs and oh, woe is me and all that kind of stuff. But it helped me get through. It really helped me get through. And I found that surprisingly, people liked my music. When I was in university, I was still writing, but not performing for anyone or anything, because I was too afraid to do that. But I went into the shower in the residence one morning, and another woman was singing one of my songs.
Wow.
She'd heard me, I guess, play it often enough. And, you know, these things would tell you maybe I should pursue it, but I was just too afraid. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I decided maybe I could write. And I turned to writing because I felt like I had more control over words than I did anything else.
Wow.
And so I did focus a lot of my time there, but it took me a long time to really embrace my creative self. I always did creative jobs, always. No matter what I did, I ended up in a creative job. My very first job was one I made up with a bunch of friends, and we went to senior citizens' homes and children's hospitals, any place where people were sort of immobile, and we sang and we danced, and I made puppets out of paper mache, and we did puppet shows. It was so much fun. And then I worked at A&W as a car hop for a while. Gregg, you might remember those. I don't know if they had them in the US, but basically you carry your tray and go to the car window with the food. So that was the only non-creative job I had. But then I worked in audiovisual production for about 10 years. Not like film, but like way back in the olden days, slide projectors, like banks of 24 projectors, sometimes only 2. But I spent a lot of time doing that. And then I raised kids, which believe me is a creative enterprise.
I'm sure, and sons at that. Yes, three.
I live in a very noisy household still.
Yes.
But eventually I turned back to the writing, and I wrote a book when my youngest was 6 weeks old. I finished it and submitted it, and it was published. Wow. And I thought, you know, if I'd been smart, I would have kept it up then. But I felt I'm one of those people who, when I get into something, I really dive in, and it's kind of like all the way. And I couldn't be a mom and do the kind of writing that I wanted to do. So it kind of slid by the wayside. And then when my youngest went into grade 2, I went to work for a national church organization as the news director. And so I did a lot of article writing, much gentler journalism than you would find in regular news. You know, we would actually go back to our sources sometimes and say, this is what I saw. Does that feel right?
Right.
Because of the nature of it. So I did that. And then in 2017, the organization was restructuring, and I was downsized out of a job. And I didn't know what to do. Like I felt like I still wanted to work, but I hadn't delved in the creative side of me, like the purely creative side of me, for so long.
Right.
I took some time to sort of rediscover myself. And that's where I really started, you know, pursuing gratitude and trying to find out who I was, doing meditation, all those kinds of things that brought me back to me, to the little kid who was bouncing around the house wanting to be Julie Andrews and, you know, making up songs about everything she did. And so that has led me back into writing and into pursuing it as a means of, okay, this is going to sound kind of grand, but I feel really very strongly that words and stories have power.
Very much so. Yeah.
Stories, however we use them, we can change things. And I want to share the message that we can change things for good through story. You know, our brains are wired for story. If we read a story or experience a film, our mind doesn't know that we haven't had that experience. It interprets. You even get muscle memory from stories. Yeah. So if we use stories with the love and care with which they were originally intended, we can actually make a difference. And I see stories and the words we put out in the world as creating a ripple effect. So that's my mission for the rest of my life. I want to change the world with words and stories, and maybe write it again.
You know what's interesting? When people go into hypnosis, the person who's hypnotizing you would like to know if you're remembering a film, an actual film, or are you remembering something that's real Or if you do past life regression, they try to make sure it's not a film memory, but it's actual past life memory. And I've done both. And I know how film and TV and whatever things you've put into your mind can filter in, and I know when it doesn't as well. So it could be really amazing. I know that you won an award for young adults, and it was also interpreted into German, one of your books. Is it Out of the Fire?
Yeah, Out of the Fire. I've got that. This is the book published in Canada, Out of the Fire, the original version.
Beautiful.
And then they translated it into German, and they did 2 hardcover print runs. The second hardcover is a different cover, but it was shortlisted for the national. I won't attempt to say the German word because my pronunciation is awful. But basically, it's the National Literature Prize for young people, and it was shortlisted with 4 other books for the award. So
beautiful.
That was kind of cool because what was really interesting is at that time, my kids were in school and we had them in a German bilingual school because my husband has German in his background and spoke German until he went to school. So we thought it would be nice. So it was just kind of neat that if it had to be translated, it was into German.
That's amazing. And I know you illustrated a children's book. Mm-hmm. So you actually illustrated it yourself, wrote it. So let's talk about that process, because what I'm hearing and seeing is that your creative person was just trying to get out. She was just trying to boom, kick the doors open. And you have, because you have many illustrated books. Can you talk about that process?
Well, I would say that you're right about this creative person wanting to get out. And I think that what I was doing most of my life is looking for validation from other people instead of from myself. And I look back and I think, how lame. I mean, that's crazy. I lost so much time.
We all do it.
Yeah. Yes. But
yeah,
so this particular book, Mr. Jacobson's Window, it's a story about a little girl who sees a new neighbor through his living room window in the apartment block they share. And he looks really scary through the window. And so he kind of terrifies her. And so the process is her getting to realize that, no, that's not exactly the way things are. And people, you can't always go by first impressions. So this was actually a story I had written for a Christmas Eve service at church for the kids. And I wrote it because I wanted to come up with something that wasn't all about the traditional stories. I wanted it to be something about connections and neighborhood and whatever. And so this story came out and nobody wanted to publish it because it was seasonal and it's hard to get a seasonal story published.
Right.
So eventually I found a local publisher here in Winnipeg who loved the story. And she had an artist in mind for it, but it didn't work out. It was just, I had to basically tell him what to draw, and he couldn't do it unless I gave him an initial ground drawing, and there was all kinds of things involved. So eventually she just said, why don't you do it? And so I did it.
Wow.
It was interesting.
You said like it's so easy, I just drew it. They're amazing. Your illustrations are amazing.
Well, you know what? I had not drawn in years. I had not picked up a pencil and drawn in years. And so I had to draw. I had to make a character that looked the same from page to page. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I need a color palette. I can't just flop down any color on the page. There has to be some consistency of style. And so there were and I worked with acrylics, which I have never used before to that degree. It was just, there were so many things, but I have a book designer friend who is an amazing artist who kind of would give me these little coaching remarks all the way through. And it was like a do or die kind of process. I stayed up late at night under the lights over our kitchen island because it was the only place that was bright at night and painted.
Wow. That's wonderful. That's the creative process. This is why I want to do this show, because everything all of you have talked about is the creative process, and everyone's process is very different. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it's a moment, sometimes it takes a season, literally a season. It's really beautiful. Where you live in Winnipeg, is it inspiring? Are you inspired by the land, inspired by the people?
Winnipeg is an amazing cultural center. It has about I think it's just over 700,000 people, so it's not huge. But we have theater, we have museums, we have all kinds of art on the go. And if you're into sports, we have all kinds of sports on the go. There's an amazing writing community here. I know so many writers. So it is a really creative center. And, we've often, my friends and I have often talked about that. Why is it so creative here? Well, I think there's 2 reasons. In the summer, you have mosquitoes. In the winter, it could be 50 below. So we have a lot of time where we might be indoors. So it gives you time to work on your creative stuff.
Wow. And you're surrounded by lakes, right? Lakes, a lot of lakes. And
yes, Manitoba is full of lakes and beaches and so on. And then we've got a little lake. It's actually a retention pond, but in our backyard with geese and birds. So in the summer, I sit on the deck and write and listen to the birds sing. I absolutely love it.
It's interesting. You posted a photo recently about a squirrel, the apple. And I was like, that's a children's book. That is a children's book. I hope you jotted down something, because I was like, that is a children's book. I
never even thought of that, but yeah, you're probably right.
You know, Deborah, hold on. We're going to be right back. How can everyone reach you on Instagram or your website?
You can find me on both at Deborah Freeze, DeborahFreese.
Yes, thank you.
.com on the internet.
Yes, thank you. And we'll be right back with all three guests, and we're going to talk about gratitude. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, D'Angelo.
Watch Live with Jesse and Melva right here on Solivity TV every Sunday at 5:30 Eastern.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Welcome back to Beauty and Gratitude. I forgot to mention something earlier, that we have a sample kit from Anne-Marie Skincare that we're offering within the US. I have to be very specific. We're not shipping internationally, but it's a free gift. And the first 2 people to email us will send you a package. And what it is actually mineral makeup with oil, and natural minerals. So for clients who really can't use normal makeup, I did a campaign for them. And let me tell you guys, it works. There's coverage, and it's amazing. So Anne-Marie Skincare, it's a mineral set. Gregg, I see you looking really hard. I'm going to send you one. I'm going to send you one. First, thank you guys for coming on my show, Beauty and Gratitude. And I want to talk about gratitude. So I'm actually going to start with you, Deborah. What are you grateful for?
I am grateful for the process of gratitude and the practice of gratitude, because really, I think that's where I started to embrace the inner me and just be accepting of who I am.
Yes, that's beautiful. And Gregg, what are you grateful for?
Well, you mentioned earlier, I'm a Buddhist. And one of the tenets of the Buddhist practice that I do is sort of resetting twice a day. We do a prayer twice a day. And so I'm really grateful for the idea that I can take a moment, have a moment, and then reset.
Very important, so important. And China, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for God and the family He assigned to me.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
That hit me in the heart. Wow. You know, China sent me a message earlier from my book, 100 Days of Gratitude. And do you remember the quote, China?
Yes. Oh gosh, pressure.
It's number 48. It's about being assigned to who you are.
We're all miracles.
Yeah, being grateful for basically your existence and the things you go through in this life. And I think all of you have shown a testament of what your life's journey has been, and the willingness, even though there's some resistance, the willingness to be open to it, right?
Yes.
For me, gratitude is talking to all of my guests that come on this show. It's very uplifting, it's inspiring, but I think it's important for people to know the creative process. So each one of you, give people a nugget of how to be creative in your field. So China, as an actress, give us a nugget. What helps you?
You know what? I would say, thank you for that question, D'Angelo. I would say respect the craft of storytelling. It is the means to share the complexity of humanity and just enjoy it. That's what I was saying.
That's great. And Deborah?
Well, I'd like to echo what China just said, because I think she's very right there. But I'll add my own little twist on it too. I think that as a creative person, as any person, because we're all born creative, you need to take the time to breathe and look at yourself and trust your instincts.
Yes. Yes. I call it the flow. Trust the flow. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Gregg?
For me, it's about respecting the environment you're in, having gratitude for the people that you're around. And, you know, as creatives, as fellow creatives, we're really so fortunate to have something that can be viewed by other people as beautiful as our outlet. So I'm really happy about that. We could be doing awful things and we're not, we're doing beautiful things. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, we're vessels. We're all vessels. We bring something very powerful to this realm. And if you tap into that energy, that's why I believe all things are possible. When someone says to me, oh, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm this, I'm that, I believe it because you're multidimensional. You know, we're not one-dimensional creatures. So thank you, multidimensional beings, for being on Beauty and Gratitude. Thank you. And I will talk to you all soon. And thank you, everyone, for watching Beauty and Gratitude. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thanks so much, D'angelo.
Thank you for watching Beauty and Gratitude with your host, D'angelo Thompson, on Solivity TV, Fridays at 8 p.m. Solivity Magazine brings you the best in inspiration on Solivity TV. Check out our new shows. Mark your calendars for Solivity Magazine shows by going to solivity.com now.